They say the best revenge is living well. But here's something most people don't realize. The real kind of revenge is sitting across the dinner table from your enemies and letting them believe they've already won. Welcome back to Dad's True Revenge. Grab your snacks, settle in, and remember, the people in these stories had every opportunity to act right. They simply chose not to. Leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe. You're going to enjoy it here. The thing about being wealthy is that no one believes you when you appear broke. I mean that quite literally. I drive a 2006 Toyota Tacoma with a cracked passenger side mirror I've been planning to fix for 3 years. I wear a Casio watch. Not as a joke, not as some billionaire habit. I just like it. It tells time. It doesn't need charging. What more could you want from a watch? My name is Frank Colton, and for the past 22 years, I've owned Colton Marsh Industries, a manufacturing and logistics company that quietly ranks among the top in its field. We move products across 14 states. We employ just under 4,000 people. Last fiscal year, we cleared a number that would probably make your coffee go cold if I told you. But if you saw me on a Wednesday morning outside my house in Beckley, West Virginia, watering tomatoes in a flannel shirt and worn-out garden clogs, you'd probably offer me a coupon, not a seat in a boardroom. That's exactly how I prefer it. Now, my daughter Lacey, bless her, didn't inherit my preference for staying unnoticed. She's smart, she's beautiful, she has her mother's laugh, and unfortunately, her mother's taste in dramatic men. When she brought Clayton Hale home for the first time 3 Thanksgivings ago, I shook his hand, looked him in the eye, and thought, this man has never been told no in his life. You can always recognize it. There's a certain shine to people like that, like the world has been polishing them their entire lives. Clayton wasn't a bad person. I want to be clear about that. At least that's what I kept telling myself. He was intelligent, well-dressed, and confident in a way that filled a room. When I quietly ran him through our internal vetting process, yes, I vetted my daughter's boyfriend. And no, I don't apologize for it. His results were strong. His instincts were sharp. So when Lacey told me she was serious about him, I did something I had never done in 22 years. I promoted based on emotion. I made Clayton Hale the CEO of Colton Marsh Industries. He had no idea who he was truly working for. As far as Clayton knew, he had been recruited by a high-level firm, interviewed by a panel of executives, and earned the role purely on merit, which, to be fair, he mostly had. I just helped open the door a little. Lacey knew, of course. She thought it was both sweet and completely insane. Dad, she said the night I told her, sitting at my kitchen counter with a mug of chamomile tea, you do realize this sounds like a soap opera. I prefer to think of it as strategic family planning, I told her. She gave me that look. Fathers know the look. The one that says, I love you, but you are completely unreasonable. For 14 months, everything went smoothly. Clayton ran the company well, better than I expected, honestly. That both pleased and irritated me because it meant Lacey had better judgment than I gave her credit for, and I wasn't quite ready to admit that. Then, one Thursday evening in March, Clayton called me. Not as a son-in-law. He spoke the way he always did, warm, respectful, slightly performative, like young executives tend to sound when they believe they're talking to a simple older man. Frank, he said, I'd like you to come to dinner, meet my parents properly. They're in town for the weekend. He added, they've been asking about you for a while. Something shifted in my stomach when he said that. Not quite alarm, more like hearing a familiar word and not being able to place where you've heard it before. They've been asking about me? I said. Yeah, he replied with a brief pause that lasted just a bit too long. You know how parents are. They want to know who their son married. I almost declined. My instincts were speaking clearly. But there's a version of me, the one that spent 30 years building something from nothing, the one that has been tested and endured, that doesn't run from instincts. He moves toward them slowly, hands in his pockets. Sure, I said. Tell me where. The restaurant was called Aldridge's, the kind of place where the menu doesn't list prices and the waitstaff introduce themselves by first name while maintaining steady eye contact like they've been trained to do so. I wore my cleanest flannel on purpose. Clayton met me at the door, freshly groomed, wearing a jacket that likely cost more than my first car. He looked at my shirt, And to his credit, real credit, he didn't react. "You look great," he said. "I look like a man who found parking," I replied. He laughed. I didn't. Inside, Stuart and Norma Hale were already seated. Now understand this about first impressions. In my experience, people who have done something wrong tend to overcompensate when they meet you. They're too warm, too welcoming. The smile comes before the eyes catch up. Stuart Hale stood and shook my hand with both of his. The double-handed handshake, which usually means either deep sincerity or careful calculation. "Frank, we've heard so much about you. Please sit," he said. Norma touched my arm and told me I looked wonderfully comfortable, which is the polite, expensive restaurant way of noting my flannel and deciding I wasn't a threat. "Good," we ordered. We made small talk. Clayton spoke about the company carefully, the way he always did around me, keeping details vague out of what he believed was professional courtesy. Stuart asked about my small property in Beckley, which Lacey had apparently mentioned. I told him I grew tomatoes. He nodded the way people nod when they've stopped listening. About 40 minutes in, right between the entree and the moment I started thinking I might have imagined everything, Stuart Hale reached into the inside pocket of his blazer. He pulled out an envelope, cream-colored, thick, the kind that doesn't come from a drugstore. He placed it on the table in front of me gently, deliberately, the way you place something when you want it understood that what's inside matters. He folded his hands. Norma lifted her wine glass. Clayton, and this is the part I keep returning to, Clayton looked down at his plate. "Frank," Stuart said, lowering his voice just enough to signal we were no longer making small talk, "we've been wanting to sit down with you for a long time. There are certain things about the past, about your history, that we believe deserve a conversation." I looked at the envelope, then at Stuart, then at Clayton, who was still studying his salmon as if it owed him something. And I thought, there it is, 22 years of building, 22 years of silence, 22 years of believing that what happened with Victor Marsh had stayed buried where I left it. I picked up my water glass and took a slow sip. "Stuart," I said, placing it back down with a quiet click, "before I open that, I think you should know something about me." He smiled, calm and confident, the smile of a man who believes he holds every card. "I'm listening," he said. I leaned forward slightly. "I never sit at a table I haven't already turned." The envelope rested between us like a grenade with the pin already pulled. And no one at that table, not Stuart, not Norma, not even Clayton, knew which one of us was holding the pin. If you've made it this far, do one quick thing: subscribe. Many people watch without doing it, but it costs nothing and means a lot to us. Thank you sincerely. I didn't open the envelope immediately. That matters because the entire situation, and make no mistake, this was absolutely a game, depended on who reacted first. Stuart Hale had clearly spent significant time preparing for this moment. The restaurant, the timing, the carefully chosen envelope placed just right. It was all deliberate. A performance. And performances only work when the other person follows the script. I had no intention of doing that. So instead, I picked up my fork, cut into my steak, chewed slowly, and let the silence settle over the table like an uninvited fifth guest. Norma shifted in her seat. A slight crack appeared in the corner of Stuart's patient smile. Clayton still hadn't looked up. Finally, after what I counted as a very satisfying 45 seconds, I set my fork down, wiped my mouth with the cloth napkin, and reached for the envelope. Inside were photocopied documents, clean and neatly arranged with the kind of careful order that suggests a lawyer had reviewed them. I didn't read them right away. I didn't need to. The moment my eyes landed on the name at the top of the first page, my chest felt both cold and completely steady at the same time. Victor Marsh. Let me explain who Victor Marsh was. In 1987, Victor Marsh and I were business partners. We were 26, broke in the way only young men with big ambition and no capital can be. And we had a plan to build something, a small manufacturing operation in Columbus. Nothing flashy, metal parts for industrial equipment. The kind of business that doesn't make headlines but keeps the world running. For 4 years, we built it together. And for 4 years, I ignored every sign that Victor was not the man I believed him to be. He was skimming, not in a big, obvious way, but slowly and consistently, like termites working through wood until the structure is hollow and you don't notice until it collapses. By 1991, Victor had taken enough from our shared accounts to fund a separate business, a competitor built using clients he had taken, along with our contacts and my relationships. When I discovered it, I didn't react loudly. I became very quiet. I spent 6 months documenting everything, every transaction, every redirected contract, every forged signature. When I had enough, when the file was detailed enough to end his career in multiple ways, I sat across from Victor Marsh in that same small Columbus office and gave him a choice. Walk away, shut down his competing business, transfer his remaining stake, and disappear. Or I would take everything to the district attorney, and he would spend years explaining himself in court. Victor Marsh chose to disappear. I rebuilt on my own, and I decided I would never trust a partner again. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Victor Marsh had a younger brother, 15 years younger, a boy who was around 11 when all of this happened. A boy who grew up hearing only one version of the story from a broken man who never admitted what he had actually done. That boy was Stuart. I looked up from the documents. Stuart was watching me with the focus of someone who had waited a long time for this moment. "Where did you get these?" I asked quietly. "Victor kept records," Stuart said. "His own records. Everything you did to him, Frank. Every threat, every ultimatum, how you pushed him out of a company he helped build." I nodded slowly. "And you've been holding on to these for how long?" "Long enough," he said. "Victor passed away 4 years ago. Lung cancer. He died with nothing, Frank. Nothing, because of what you took from him." And there it was, the grief beneath the strategy. I'll be honest, I felt it. A small, quiet sense of understanding for the version of the story Stuart believed, because to him, it was real. "Stuart," I said carefully, "I'm sorry about your brother. I don't want your condolences. I understand. What do you want?" He leaned forward. "I want you to resign, quietly, from whatever role you still have at Colton Marsh. I want a formal financial settlement. The amount is in the envelope, paid to my family as compensation for what Victor lost. And I want it handled before my son's name gets tied to anything that comes next." That was when Clayton finally looked up. What I saw on Clayton Hale's face in that moment matters. It wasn't the expression of someone involved in a plan. It was the look of a man hearing something he wasn't fully prepared to hear. His jaw tightened slightly. His eyes moved from his father to me and back again, with the uncertainty of someone who thought this was just dinner and was now realizing it wasn't. "Dad," Clayton began. "Clayton." Stuart's tone shut that down immediately. Clayton said nothing more. I watched that exchange carefully. "How long have you known?" I asked Clayton directly. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, glancing at his father. "Clayton," I said, more calmly this time, "I'm asking you, not him." He exhaled and rubbed the back of his neck. I knew there was history between our families. Dad told me when Lacey and I got serious. He said there was a debt that needed to be settled and that me being close to you was... He stopped. "Was what?" I asked. "An opportunity," he admitted quietly. He didn't need to say more. At that moment, Norma placed her hand over mine with a level of warmth that felt practiced. "Frank, this doesn't have to be unpleasant," she said. "We're family now. This is about making things right." I looked at her hand, then at her face, at the smile that had clearly been prepared before I even arrived. "Norma," I said politely, "I need you to listen carefully to what I say next. Because here's the reality. A man who has been doing this for 30 years doesn't walk into a situation like this unprepared. Not when instinct has been warning him all week. Not when a name like Victor Marsh is still part of his past. I had made a few calls of my own. I placed my own envelope on the table. Smaller, plain white, nothing remarkable about it. Victor's records are incomplete, I said, which makes sense. When someone builds a false version of events, they tend to keep only the pieces that support it. Stuart's eyes moved to my envelope. "What I have here," I continued, "are the original bank records from our joint account between 1989 and 1991. The withdrawal patterns, the wire transfers to a shell company registered under Victor's wife's maiden name. Correspondence, including 3 emails where Victor clearly outlined his plan to copy our client list and start a competing business using our infrastructure." I paused briefly. I also have a signed affidavit from Dale Puit, Victor's accountant at the time. He's 71, in good health, and fully willing to testify about what he handled under Victor's instructions. Stewart's expression changed. The confidence was gone. What replaced it looked less like anger and more like something closer to grief. "You destroyed him," he said, his voice no longer controlled. "He destroyed himself," I replied. "And then he told you a version of events that allowed him to see himself as a victim instead of what he really was. You threatened him. You forced him. I gave him a choice," I said. "The same choice the law would have given him, just without the public exposure. What he did with that choice was his decision." Stewart stood up, not abruptly, just slowly, like his body moved before his thoughts caught up. Norma touched his arm. "Sit down, Stewart," I said calmly. "Please. This conversation isn't over, and the part that matters most now is about your son." For the first time since I sat down, I saw something different in Clayton's face. Not confidence, not control, something closer to discomfort. "Clayton," I said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen to me as if I'm just Frank. Not your father-in-law, not an older man in a flannel shirt, just Frank." He gave a slight nod. I leaned forward. "I know who you are. I've known since before you walked through my daughter's front door. And what I'm about to tell you is going to change everything you think you understand about the last 14 months. At that moment, the waiter stepped near the table. "Can I interest anyone in dessert?" he asked politely. All four of us looked at him. He stepped away. Clayton Hale was about to learn that the quiet man in the flannel shirt wasn't just part of his world. He had built it. If you've been following along and want more stories like this, it really helps if you like the video and subscribe. Most people don't, but it keeps everything going. So thank you. Let me explain something about the idea of a reveal. People expect it to be loud, raised voices, accusations, someone leaving the room. That's not how it works in reality. In my experience, the most effective reveals happen quietly. The words carry enough weight on their own. I poured a glass of water, took a sip, set it down, and continued. "Clayton," I said, "what do you know about how you got your job?" He straightened slightly, instinctively returning to his executive composure. "I was recruited," he said. "An executive search firm. I interviewed with the board. It was competitive." "It was," I said, "completely legitimate. Your numbers were strong. Your instincts were solid. Hold on to that part, because it's true." He frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said, "that the search firm that recruited you was hired by me. The board you interviewed with reports to me. The position you've held for the past 14 months, the office, the benefits, the salary, exists within a company that I fully own." I paused. "I've owned it for 22 years. His expression shifted slowly, like a system trying to process information it wasn't built to handle. "You're," he started. "Frank Colleton," I said, "founder and sole owner of Colton Marsh Industries. The Marsh in the name was Victor's. I kept it as a reminder of what I learned building this company." Silence followed. "You've been running my company, Clayton, reporting to my executives, approving my contracts, sitting in a position I placed you in." Across the table, Stewart had sat back down at some point. He looked like a man watching something he had built collapse piece by piece. "Why?" Clayton asked. The question sounded more honest than polished. "Why would you do that?" Norma let out a quiet reaction. "So this was some kind of test." He looked at the tablecloth for a long moment. Then he looked at his father, and I noticed something shift in Clayton Hale's eyes that I hadn't expected. It wasn't confusion anymore. It wasn't exactly shame either. It was something colder, clearer. "How long?" he asked Stewart, quietly and directly. "Nothing," Stewart said. "Dad." Clayton's voice carried an edge I hadn't heard before. "How long have you known who Frank was?" "How long?" Stewart adjusted his cufflinks, a delay so obvious it almost felt unnecessary. "I started to suspect when you mentioned the company name, Colton Marsh. Victor told me about Colton years ago. I looked into it. When I told you the company name," Clayton repeated slowly, "so before Lacey and I got engaged, I was protecting our family. You positioned me," Clayton said. His tone was flat and precise, like he was reading a report. "You found out who I was working for, saw an opportunity, and let me fall in love with Lacey. You encouraged it because you thought I was your way in." Norma reached for her son's hand. "Sweetheart, Your Uncle Victor deserves. Don't. Clayton pulled his hand back. Don't bring up Victor right now. I stayed completely still because what was happening across that table no longer involved me. This was a young man seeing his father clearly, maybe for the first time. The right move was to say nothing. Stewart shifted tactics. Everything I did was for this family, Clayton. That man took everything from your uncle, from us. You were finally in a position to... To what? Clayton cut in. His voice cracked briefly, then steadied. Help you pressure my father-in-law? Use my wife's family to settle a 30-year grudge over a story that, based on what Frank just showed us, wasn't even accurate? Stewart didn't respond. I picked up my water glass again, mostly to keep my hands occupied. After a moment, Clayton turned back to me. His expression had settled, controlled. I recognized it. It was the same look he used walking into difficult board meetings. It was, I realized quietly, the face of a CEO. I owe you an apology, he said. You don't, I replied. You didn't know. I knew enough to feel something was off tonight. And I came anyway, he said. I sat here while my father put that envelope in front of you, and I looked down at my plate. That's not who I want to be. I held his gaze for a moment. No, I said, it isn't. And the fact that you recognize that is exactly why you still have a job on Monday. Something passed across his face. Relief held in check. As for you, I said, turning to Stewart. He lifted his chin slightly, the final posture of someone not ready to admit defeat. The documents you brought tonight, I continued, nodding toward the cream envelope, are incomplete and misleading. In light of what I've presented, they hold no real weight against me. I paused briefly. You came here believing you had leverage. In reality, you brought something that only looked like leverage. Stewart said nothing. I'm not going to take legal action against you, I added. Not because I can't, but because Victor was your brother. Grief can lead people to act in ways they normally wouldn't. I understand that. I'm genuinely sorry for how he told you that story, and that you carried it for so long. Norma looked down at the table, her eyes wet. I almost felt sympathy. Almost. But I need you to hear this next part clearly, I said, because I won't repeat it. I leaned forward slightly. Clayton is the CEO of my company. Lacey is my daughter, and as of her 25th birthday 3 months ago, a majority shareholder in that same company. Your son married into something you spent years trying to access. And the only reason any of that remains available to him, and by extension, to your family, is because he just proved to me in the last 10 minutes that he is not you. The silence that followed was complete. Stewart Hale picked up his napkin, folded it carefully, and placed it beside his plate. A small, controlled gesture. We should go, he said quietly to Norma. She nodded without looking at anyone. They stood. Stewart instinctively reached toward the envelope in his jacket, then stopped and left it where it was. He paused briefly beside Clayton. Son, I'll call you, he said. Later, Clayton replied. Not tonight, later. There was distance in those two words. Stewart and Norma Hale walked out of Aldridge's. I watched them leave and felt nothing dramatic, just a quiet sense of closure, like something unresolved for 30 years had finally been set aside. Clayton and I sat in silence for a moment. The waiter returned, confident the tension had passed. Dessert? He asked. Clayton looked at me. I looked at him. You know what? I said, yes. What's the chocolate option? 2 of those, I added. And coffee. Real coffee, not decaf. The waiter nodded and left. Clayton exhaled deeply, like he'd been holding it in since before the meal began. Frank, he said, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. I nodded. Do you actually trust me to run the company? Not as Lacey's husband, as a CEO. I considered the question carefully. 6 months ago, I said, you restructured the Midwest distribution chain and saved us $4.3 million annually. You did it without being asked. You identified the issue, created a solution, and presented it before I even knew there was a problem. I paused. So yes, I trust you. He nodded slowly, processing that. But, I added, and he looked up again, Monday morning, you and I are going to have a proper conversation. Not father-in-law and son-in-law. Not owner and CEO. Just 2 men. We'll talk honestly about everything we know and how we move forward. No more gaps. A small smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. You're really not going to stop wearing the flannel, are you? The flannel stays, I said. He laughed. A genuine one, the first all evening. The desserts arrived. We ate. The chocolate was excellent. I made a mental note to tip the waiter well. He had earned it. I drove home in my 2006 Toyota Tacoma, the cracked passenger mirror still unfixed. The city passed by quietly outside the windows. I thought about Victor Marsh, the young man he once was, before greed changed him. I thought about Stuart, somewhere tonight, facing a version of the story he would now have to rebuild. I thought about Clayton, heading home to my daughter, trying to explain an evening that had reshaped his understanding of everything. And I thought about what it means to build something, not just a company, but a way of living that ensures when someone eventually comes for you, and they always do, you're not caught off guard. You're already prepared. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the truck for a moment. My house stood there, modest, warm, the kitchen light still on because Lacey had stopped by earlier and never remembers to turn it off. My phone buzzed. A message from Clayton. I told Lacey everything. She says you're impossible and she loves you. Also, she says the flannel is embarrassing, and she agrees with me. I smiled, typed back, tell her the flannel built her inheritance. I put the phone away, stepped out of the truck, and walked to my front door. Somewhere across the city, Stuart Hale was sitting with an empty envelope and a story that no longer held together, and I was heading back to my tomatoes. Some men build empires to prove something. Frank Colleton built his to protect something. There's a difference, and tonight, everyone at that table understood it. If you enjoyed this story, join the community by liking the video and subscribing for more real, grounded, family-centered stories. And as always, thank you for being here.